stand up for our rights before our liberty dies. And we need to stand up for our rights before our liberty dies.
We're in a world, how many ordinary human beings are refusing to accept the narrative and are developing spiritually, energetically, and are moving out of the control system of this network. That's all that matters. Because if you raise your vibrational energy, then this evil intent has less and less hold on you.
So we need to stand up for our rights before our liberty dies. And we need to stand up for our rights before our liberty dies.
We can do so many things to escape the control that is around us. So don't be downhearted. That's really important. Yes, it's tough, but we will get there. But, how many people will fall by the wayside because they didn't believe in themselves? Hello, it's the 12th, and it's a long overdue, proper Connecting Consciousness Sunday talk. And that's for those of you who've forgotten, because it's been that long. It's where we do a 10 or 15 minute update, and then we go on to take questions from Connecting Consciousness members from all over the world, really. And of course, of late, we've just been doing updates because the situation has required that. But we've had an awful lot of people writing in saying, please, when are we going to go back to the original format? So that's it. Now, what we had was a complete loss of the computer. It completely broke just after I'd said that we were going to do the podcast. And so we're doing it on a laptop, which I thought would be, okay. Unfortunately, although the laptop's not a bad laptop, it's a reasonable one. I'm getting told that actually it's not going to come across that good. So what we're going to do is find someone who can repair it locally, and we're going to put the old PC in the back of the car and try and get them to fix it. So I do apologize if the sound quality or the picture quality is not what you would like. Please don't write in telling us that the sound quality was bad or the picture quality was bad. We already know that. And we are going to try and do something about it. Remember that we don't operate from a plush office. We don't have all of the technology and all of the support, etc., at our fingertips, and we just do our best that we can. So, if the quality is down, we are aware of it. We're going to see what we can do about it. But we thought it important just to get this out. At least we've done it. All right. So that, with that label on the front, here we go. So first of all, then, of course, the major talking point, it's resurfaced in terms of what actually is going to happen. What is the situation in America? What really is the potential outcome? Do we really have 4 years of a fake president, or is something going to happen that's going to restore the situation? So those of you who have got good memories, and in the days when I was still on YouTube before I got expelled, might remember that I said that as long as the people who originally convinced President Trump to stand, as long as those people back in 2016 stood by him, then he was going to come back. But if they somehow decided that they didn't want him anymore, or they could cut their own deal with the people behind Biden, then he wouldn't come back. And all of the information is that those people are still very solidly behind him. There is some talk, I know Robert David Steele was quite accurate when he was saying there were a number of people in the Pentagon who were wondering what the advantage of Trump coming back was. For instance, if you're in the Pentagon and you're used to having a commander-in-chief, and you no longer officially have a commander-in-chief, then there's nobody giving you orders, or there's no oversight. And so for those people, I think it's quite an exciting situation. They've got this Biden guy, and they can bottle him up. He's of no consequence to them. And so they've got a free hand and free reign. And I think there's between 10 and 15% of the Pentagon that actually rather like this situation. That may shock you, but they're not ordinary people, are they? They don't have ordinary jobs. They're in the Pentagon. They don't have a commander-in-chief. The guy who's supposed to be the president has been locked out of the Pentagon. And they literally can perhaps almost do what they want. Then you've got the vast majority, maybe 80%, 85% of the Pentagon, largely, of course, vociferously backing Trump from the Navy, the Marine side, who absolutely want Trump back. And you can grade it down through the other members of the military who perhaps just think it's right that Trump should come back. They think it's right that the Constitution should be protected. The whole point about a constitution is that the military are there to support and take orders from the civilian government. It's not a dictatorship. And whilst the military were very happy to roll tanks in different positions and assets in different positions, it's another complete step to, begin to put those assets publicly on the street. But that's, I think, where we're going with it. The vast majority of you, that's the audience, reached the conclusion a long time ago that, frankly, it is pointless running court cases in America. We watched the Sidney Powell interview, and it was a very good interview. But at each moment that Sidney Powell was talking about, well, we've got this happening in Pennsylvania, there's this in Georgia, we found 425,000 votes in Pennsylvania and 400,000 in Georgia. The question that is always, or should always be brought up at that point is, actually, what's the point? It doesn't matter whether you've got a carload of evidence if the other side are not going to even give it the light of day. So whilst I do appreciate, I can't say I understand because I've never been a lawyer, but whilst I do appreciate the huge amount of work she and others have done, frankly, what's the point of turning up to a lower court with a bookcase load of information and the lower court says, oh yeah, this is very interesting, we'll progress it. And then you go through and at some level the court says, we're not even going to hear it, we're throwing it out. What is the efficacy in all that? Now, is it simply to prove to somebody that you did everything that you could and that the only option left is a military one? Is that what it's about? Or is it that there's this hope that at the 11th hour, which I think has already gone, but the 11th hour, the court is suddenly going to change its mind and say, oh yes, we're going to hear the evidence. I mean, there are certain people in power who must think we're all stupid. I don't mean the bad guys. Bad guys have always thought we're stupid, but there must be some white hats that think we're all stupid because we all know what the fraud was. We're all aware how corrupt all the courts are. We're aware that the Congress doesn't work. We know that the Senate votes were rigged at the runoffs. We fully appreciate the stranglehold that the media mainstream have. We've got all of that. And we don't need to be told it anymore. What is the point? The question is, yes, but what is anybody going to do about it? So I think people have reached beyond the point. And I heard Lieutenant General Flynn speaking, and I've heard others speaking, and the theme they keep coming back with is the American people have got to get involved. Take your country back. Get back involved, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the problem is that when a nation of people are disheartened because there's a real question here, which is what's the point in voting anymore? why would I want to vote when I know that the bad guy is going to win? We all know, because we've been awake since November the 3rd with all of this, that unless you have a label on you which probably says Satanist or corrupt guy or deep stater, if you don't have that label on there, then the Dominion voting machines will be connected against you. So all the system is doing is rewarding, as it's always done, bad and evil people. So on one hand, you've got these white hats telling people to, get involved and take your country back, but they're perhaps not understanding that the vast majority of people who are aware are saying, but for what purpose? And I laugh when people talk about Trump contesting the 2024 election. They don't get it. There won't be a 2024 election. There won't be. Why would anybody go and vote when you know that the Dominion voting machines will just put in another satanic candidate? Why would you worry about who you want for sheriff or a school board when you know that the names of the people who are already going to win have already been given, and the Dominion machines, the voting machines, or the staff, whoever, have already decided who's going to win? So that isn't a realistic option. The only realistic option is a military removal of the corrupt civilians to be replaced by good civilians to bring back wholesome government. That is the only option. And frankly, it's disingenuous, in my opinion, for certain people to ask the American people to go get back involved. I think what's got to happen, in my opinion, is that the military have got to demonstrate to the people of America that they do mean what they say. They will return justice to America. And then I think you'll find American people will say, never again will we allow our country to be stolen. And now that the ground has been made even, we will get involved. I don't think many people, frankly, want to get involved. They are sick of politics. They are distrustful, and they don't believe that they can make any difference. So I think there's a disconnect between the message that the white hats are sending out and the people. There will always be a good, strong group of patriots who fly the flag, know the truth, and will die for their constitution. But there's a massive amount of people who are just ordinary good people, who are so used to being trodden on that they will just do what they're told. And, it's the same old group of patriots that are turning up and making the meetings. And, if the white hats want to reach that vast swathe of people, the number that voted for Trump, that would never go on a rally, would never, go and march, but would go out and vote for Trump. These are the very people who are saying, well, our country's been stolen from us. Who's going to do anything about it? And if the white hats want to engage not just with the Trump loyalists, but the vast majority of people, many of whom were Democrats and swapped their vote for Trump, the white hats want to engage with those people. They've got to change the message, I think, and they've got to actually do something tangible to give people the confidence. Lots of people are calm and saying, we're waiting. But there's a growing unease. So let's talk about what might happen. I think what might happen is that there will come in the next few weeks, not months, weeks, the unalterable decision that it's going nowhere. The courts have absolutely no intention of airing anything that will change the status quo. That the Senate and the Congress will do absolutely nothing. And so either you have a situation where you sit for 4 years in this limbo, or you don't. And if you do believe you've sworn an oath to the Constitution, then what are you going to do about it? And I think that's the question that the American people need to ask of their military, not we are going to get involved and take our country back, because that would take years. Let's be realistic. But the question that the American people need to ask their military is, what are you going to do about it? Because all of these institutions in America have been infiltrated by individuals with millions and capital B, billions of dollars over many years. Now, how are hundreds of thousands of good-meaning patriots going to take the country back? I'll give you an example of what I mean. Time and time again, we hear of big multinationals where some dodgy deal, some fiddle has gone on, and the shareholders write in to the board and say, we want a shareholders meeting because we really don't like the chief executive. We don't like what's going on here. So the law is that if a certain number write in, they have to have a meeting. So they call a big meeting, and all of the small shareholders, $100, $1,000, $10,000, maybe 100,000 worth of stock, they cram into the room. And time again, they raise their hand to speak and they say their piece. They don't like the way it's going. They're unhappy, and it goes to a vote. But it's not one man or woman a vote. It's what your stock is. And so they take the vote, and then one man stands up in the corner who has 51% of the stock. He has 51% of the stock. He says, I think you're doing a very good job. And the 49 are made up of all these individuals, don't count for anything. And this is what I'm saying. What's happened in America is that individuals, small individuals in terms of numbers, are controlling the narrative in America. So even if you had 500,000 people who want something, and one person who was a multi-billionaire, he would win, because the way the system is at the moment, it's geared to that. So that's the truth. And American people aren't stupid. They know that, and they realize what they're up against. And so I think there's a wall that's been reached. Is okay, we need some heavy equipment to break through this wall. So that's that. But let's talk about this financial system. Very, very positive on that. It's going remarkably well, I think. We should see a complete change in the way that the standard organizations do business. It's not just about it makes it faster to transfer money from one account to another, but it takes the control away from individuals who, from the days of Babylon and perhaps beyond, have exerted influence over it. And I've said it, that you go to the bank, you put money in over the weekend, the bank plays with it, and it imagines it's got 30 times what it's got in the bank. And hopefully, are you lucky, on the Monday you go back in, and that $1 or pound is still back in there. Sometimes, of course, banks go bust, but they use the taxpayers to bail them out. So the point is that if you always know you're going to be bailed out, then you'll take risks because you're not worried. But we have a system now that's coming into play, which is called the QFS, the Quantum Financial System, this new ledger system. And that actually will, I believe, when that fully kicks in, that will have a remarkable benefit for the way it works. Again, there are going to be issues. The bad people don't want that in, and they will do what they can to try and prevent it. And they will kick and scream. But what I have seen and what I've heard leads me to be very strongly confident that the system is well on its way to, being locked into place. And I do think that there'll be some very exciting moves from that. In terms of connecting consciousness and the organization, we do believe that we are strongly positioned to be able to, work up any projects or any ideas that we may have, that somebody may come to us and say, do you have any ideas about what could happen on the earth? What could be really good? We are waiting to basically be asked to start to present those projects. And we do hope that, that all works out nicely, because for too long, big players, negative people, satanic forces just people who are just greedy, frankly, just bottom line, just greedy and don't care. They call the shots on this planet. And, even when you're supposed to have these organizations that give money for good causes, when you look, the money just goes back into the same pockets. Now, I used to live in a particular place, and there was a big park, a recreational ground, and it received money from the National Lottery, millions from the National Lottery. And when you look into it, and I, a long time ago, used to have a job for a local council, and we were match funded with European Social Fund or regional development funds, all the other monies. And what you found out was that the pivotal point for these organizations to give money out was you already had to have had money from somewhere else. So these good projects, you never see, let's just say 7 people who have formed a club and they want to rescue dogs, or they want to rescue trees that the local council is chopping down left, right, and centre, or they want to do something to make the entrance to a school playground safer. And they put in an application for money. They'll never get it. They'll never get it because they are not considered serious players. You can't sit down in a big expensive restaurant with the woman that lives at number 35 and hold a banking conversation. They just don't do it. And so what we've seen is the same old bad guys getting it, the councils, the big corporates, the supposedly not-for-profit organizations. But when you look into it, they're actually a huge corporate who set up a little arm, a little annex, which was not for profit. So I've seen, and I've worked in those organizations, didn't work there very long, where the government gives massive amounts of money to this charitable organization. But really, it's just an offshoot of a massive corporate. Well, that's not helping humanity, because those organizations, in my opinion, and I've worked in them, and so have many other people, they're not there for the reasons that we would like. They're there to have stocks and shares and to build their empire. So those have all got to change. And that's going to be very difficult for big players who have been greedy, used to huge returns, don't give a damn about people or how they live, and frankly, would never come out of London. I'm talking about obviously Britain now. What would come out of London for? The world is London. They don't care about the North. And I lived in the North for a long time. And it's true. It's true. There's a real big divide between the concept of the city people. I don't mean the way they live, but the connection to government, the connection to banking, the connection to all their friends, powerful friends in it. So, Connecting Consciousness hopes in the near future to be part of this new wave of humanity on the earth. And that's one of the reasons that she'll be going to America, I don't know, end of May, June, and the flights and things are back to normal. We hope to go to America again in September, but May and June for a fact-finding tour. I'm going to meet with my coordinators from Texas, Arizona, and Florida to start with. Please don't be worried if you're outside of that. This is just this first phase of our operation. And then another meeting coming back to the United States in September to see where we got and to develop it, and then to start touring all of the rest of the states in America. And so we do hope that Connecting Consciousness will be in a pivotal position to be able to play a key role in delivering something that's not been done before. We could go on and on and on, but I can't. I'm under orders not to, because we need to get on with the questions. So I'm going to ask Becky if you could give me the first question, please.
Okay, hello. The first question is quite a long line. Can you hear me okay? Because I can hear you.
It's fine. You're coming through, as far as I'm concerned, quite clear. I don't know how it's going to come out on the final product.
Okay. This question is from Deborah in the USA. Dear Simon and Becky, Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot wrote an awesome report, the whole truth and nothing but the truth about her long weekend with alternative news journalists, Trump supporters, influencers, and others invited to attend a weekend screening and networking event arranged and hosted by 107. She realised that there are hedge fund managers and other financial peoples being wined and dined to engineer deals surrounding nuclear energy in the form of suitcase nukes, known to power underground bases, to be sold in Nevada with the intention of using them to power cities above ground. Her question is, what about free energy, the Tesla tech that we've been waiting for? Why isn't the focus as expected? Why is 107 and the Trump team pushing for the suitcase nukes? And why haven't they disclosed the horror of the underground bases and the evil therein? So what is the holdup, and how long must we eat popcorn and trust the plan? And just to finish off, Deborah says, Kerry theorises that the White Hats also need the current system so as not to lose their long-standing position amongst the wealthy elite of the world. So the question is, can they disclose all the evil and corrupt parts of the current system run and controlled by money without ultimately losing their own wealth and power in the transition to a new system? What are your thoughts on this, Simon?
Right, lots of questions, and you're going to have to help me out because I'm going to forget half of them because there were so many. Right, let's see how many we can cover before you have to help me out. I did look at the written report that Kerry Cassidy had written, and I was very impressed with it. I thought it was entirely accurate. I never really refer to Kerry as a journalist. To me, she's always been a spiritual interviewer or psychic interviewer, but there was a journalist. She was in the journalistic role, she's exactly got it right. So let's see if we can try and unpick some of those points. Again, those of you who listen to me have known I've talked about, I didn't call them a suitcase bomb, I used to call them a briefcase bomb, nuclear bombs in a briefcase. But what we're talking about now is a cold fusion type nuclear reactor, or at least the energy of that, which can be used. Again, those of you who've listened to me for 10 years or 11 years now will know that my mother worked on technologies that required nuclear devices to be the size of a small motor car, which back in the 1970s was unheard of. Yeah, absolutely. There are power sources now that will be a suitcase. Now, why would a state want that? Sometimes a state would be looking not to cede from the union, but would want its independence from the union. It wants to be part of the union, but it doesn't want to be held, blackmailed by any central force turning the power off to it. So one of the best ways you can put pressure on a state is to interrupt its water supply, its electricity. Look at California. You can cause immense disruption to a state if you're a federal agency, because you are able to interrupt certain supplies which may come from other states. So if you have a standalone power supply, then your state will be okay because you're not having to worry about anyone else. So I'm not at all surprised by that. That technology is coming out now. It's back engineered sort of stuff my mum was working on in the 1970s. And I think that there'll be favoured people in favoured states who perhaps first in the queue for this. Other states wouldn't want it, but if you feel you might be vulnerable, then you would. So I don't have any issue with that. But the big question is, well, hang on, what about Tesla technology? Well, for a while, I have been saying that you can't go from 0 to 60. People say, why not? If literally tomorrow we said wind power is obsolete, solar is obsolete, hydrocarbons are obsolete, and nuclear power is obsolete, we now have this gift in a box, which is Tesla technology, and that will power your home. Okay, first of all, you'd have to make millions of them. Secondly, what happens to the millions of jobs, and these men and women who are working have families, perhaps children, perhaps dependent on their job. What will happen if we suddenly move to Tesla technology? What are you going to do with millions of people across the planet who no longer have a job because that fossil fuel industry is dead? That is in the short answer as to why we're not going to move to Tesla technology quickly. We will move to it, but over a period of time. What we should expect to see very quickly now is the back-engineered technology to clean fuel for aeroplanes, motor cars, the combustion engine. So gasoline and diesel, to have all of the particulates, all of the poisons taken out of it. So you can run your car on ordinary fossil fuels and the government can't tax you because you're not making any pollution. So that is the interim state. That is where we will go. There's no need for electric cars. You don't need them. And then over a period of years, you'd have to move to this, what the Americans call free energy or 0-point energy. But there's absolutely no way that that is going to be brought in, because the disruption to the world's food supply, to humanity, would be incalculable. That's the short answer. I'm not so much worried about the boards who have billions of stocks and shares. I'm concerned about the men and women who work in those industries, right from the gas station right through to all the other products that require hydrocarbons. In some of the, quite amazing, some of the things that we use every day of our lives, which are oil-based. And until you have got all of the backstop filled in, that's removing and moving to a new power source is the last thing you do, because otherwise you are playing catch up with the disruption you've caused to your people. So that's the first one. What were the other questions in that, Becky?
Right.
So I talked about
Just think, why haven't they disclosed the horror of the underground bases and the evil therein? What's the holdup?
I think it will come, but it won't happen in the way that everybody wants it to happen. Let us say that somebody was brave enough to admit that there were the most awful, I can't even bring myself to say it really, the most awful places under the Capitol building or under the White House, where children were being held and all the despicable things taking place. And let's say that they said that. What's going to happen to every other country? What are they going to do? And I was having a conversation with someone today. What they're going to be saying is, say, Italy or France or Germany or Great Britain, terrible, terrible, terrible. And while they're saying terrible, 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 they're pouring concrete down the tunnels of their own places. So every country, major country, has got this, because this is a worldwide satanic connection. It's connected to off-world entities. It's connected to beings on this planet that are half human and half something else, and to humans that are just thoroughly evil. And this group that I've just described to you make up the controllers on this planet. So if the American military is going to publicly declare war, because at the moment it's a covert war, it's a private war. There's only a very handful of people, awake and aware people, who are seeing some videos or reading the reports. 85%, in my estimation, of the people on this planet haven't a clue what's going on. Haven't a clue. Children in tunnels, what are you talking about? So if you're going to make that 85% aware, what will be the reaction? The reaction, apart from the usual disbelief and anger, horror, etc., will be a total rejection then of authority. I know people will say that's great, that's what we want, but no, it isn't. If they then become lawless, or if they lose focus, and you have this massive disconnect, and you can't bring them back into what we hope to build as a new society. So first of all, it's the political outfall from every other government, who would then have to admit that they've got the same things. Then the next question is, well, who in government has been involved with this? Now, there are plenty of people alive in power today who don't want to be associated with it publicly. 9/11. The reason that I still haven't gone truthful with 9/11 is because there are a shed load of people still alive. Jimmy Savile was one of the most evil people that anyone can imagine, and he did it for carrying on his evil for 40 or 50 years. And the only time they went public was after he died. And this is the attitude they have, which is, we know it's bad, but we can't be breaking the truth while there's still people alive who could then face the consequences. So we'll wait till they're all dead, and then we'll break the truth. Well, we may not like that, but that's the pattern it's been on this earth. And so if we really are going to have this new renaissance, then really we need to be open with people and not be too bothered about their reaction. Because what we need to say is, we should lay the truth on the table and let people look at that and trust that enough people will be able to hold it together and get into a dialogue. But of course, most people in government are not like me. And they were like my grandfather. My grandfather was, you can't trust the people. The people haven't been brought up or bred to manage a government. You know, most people who are in government from a very early age went to a special school, whether it's Oxford, Eton, Cambridge, King's, wherever it might be, Harvard, Yale, and they were prepared for positions of greatness. And so that attitude is, well, the ordinary people, 95%, well, we don't want their opinion. We don't want to hear what they've got to say. We're not interested. Their job is just to do what we tell them. And this is what makes us, the ordinary people, angry. But that's the truth. And you know what I'm saying is the truth. That's the way it's been. And so if we've got to get through to that and say, actually, no, you're not the guardians of the planet. You know, you're not the arbiters of human consciousness. And so therefore, I think that with a military reinstatement of President Trump, with an arrest of these people, they might just all go to Guantanamo Bay, be tried in secret, no cameras, no nothing, and either executed or put in prison. And then somehow a Band-Aid, as we would say in America, is stuck over the whole bloody thing, and then you're just asked to carry on with your life. That isn't actually cleansing. That's the good people removing the problem from around themselves and then carrying on with the world in their way of life. But they haven't actually engaged with the public. And you can only engage with the public if you're truthful and you don't have fear of the public. But remember that people who live in these elite organizations are fearful of the public. You know, to go back to ancient Egypt, the priesthood were closeted in their temples or in the pyramid, and they would never associate with the people because ultimately these elite groups were frightened of losing control of the great masses. So what we're looking for is a real balancing of the books where the ordinary people once and for all are shown the truth. And I think that's going to come, but not in the manner that most people want. In other words, it's not going to happen quickly. This may happen over months or years. And I did have Becky, I did have this final conversation with someone. I said, it'll be easier to tell people about flying saucers and little green men than it will be to talk about COVID-19. In other words, they would find it much easier to be 100% truthful about everything to do with ETs or, you know, entities from other dimensions. That would be a walk in the park compared to the situation regarding COVID-19, regarding paedophilia and children in underground tunnels. And, you know, that's the point, because there are a ton of people associated with this paedophilia and with, you know, this COVID business. who are implicated, and they're going to fight like heck to not have the truth out. So I think we'll see a gradation, shall we say, from, yes, we'll be very open and honest about this topic, but this topic will be less open, and this topic we're going to absolutely bury under the ground. And that's, I think, the way it's going. And that's why Kerry Cassidy, and bringing it back now, that's where Kerry Cassidy was somewhat surprised or shocked. There seemed to be this talking to financiers and bankers on the one hand, while this other group are watching a film about trafficked children in underground tunnels. But remember that the Grand Old Party, separate to all this, was having its own meeting to decide how they were going to do things. So it's all compartmentalized. You've got this overarching, let's get together, but within it, they all split up into, I won't say elite groups, but special interest groups. Here's the problem all over again. So you're a specialist in this topic, you're a specialist in that topic, but you're not going to talk to them, and you won't talk to them, you won't share the information. So you may know everything about banking, but you knew nothing about underground tunnels. You may be an absolute expert on underground tunnels, but you don't know anything about COVID-19. And so this compartmentalization by meeting in different rooms and different locations at different times is not good if you don't have the opportunity to come all back. And I remember when we did our London, and you were there, Becky, our Connecting Constant meeting, we broke everyone into teams and groups, and we set them into different parts of the very big room. But then we brought them all back together again, and each group on the wall on flip chart paper or whatever it was, they shared what they had. So the whole meeting understood what each separate group had discussed, what they liked, what they didn't like. And that became the value of connecting consciousness in that meeting. But if you've got a high level group of meetings and they all then go home afterwards, you've failed to bring the conscious. So that's my group. So I believe that Kerry's 100% on target. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And to stick with the Kerry Cassidy theme, we have another question, and this is from Stephanie, who said, "Hello, I watched Kerry Cassidy's interview with Miles Johnston last night. I found it somewhat disturbing, although I felt that Kerry was trying to calm the waters a bit. Interested to know if Simon had watched it and for the opinion of others. Thank you for all that you do, Stephanie."
Yes, I did watch it. Of course, I know Miles of old. That sounds terrible. I don't mean it like that. Miles has a wealth of knowledge. It really has. He's not just interviewed people, but he's been around phenomena that's occurred, and he's seen it with his own eyes and been aware of it. I don't generally make comment about people or individuals. He did make comment to me. He said something like, I made a comment about Petri dish, etc., etc. Everyone has their own view based on the way they interpret the information they receive. I've always thought that the human race was going to survive. It may not go as quickly. We just had these conversations, and not as quickly as we want. But we have to balance what we want with what the groundwork is, what the structure is, and how we can make that work. And some people are more inclined that the human race is doomed, that there's no point in doing anything, the bad guys have got us, and etc., etc. Now, I haven't ever felt that view, because I actually have seen a future that is much brighter than the future or the present that we have at the moment. So I do see a future where there is this Tesla technology. I do see the future where the truth about 9/11 on underground bases is brought out, but you don't see it all being splashed on the newspaper on Monday morning, which is what most people seem to think should or could happen. I do see it as part of a program to let everybody know what's happened, but in such a way as that the whole fabric of society is not going to collapse. So I do have this strong positive sense for the future, but at a speed that is not dictated by ourselves. Miles speaks his mind, and he's seen a lot of bad stuff. I don't think he'd mind me saying that. He's interviewed a lot of people who have been quite dark, and perhaps he's realized that there's quite a strong force there that doesn't want to give up. I think that it isn't going to be the case, because I think the forces of good are greater than the forces of evil. And it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not. From this perspective, that the human soul is quite powerful. And I was heartened when Miles did talk about the ability of the human consciousness to out-evolve certain evils. And I'll give you an example, that a number of diseases have been dropped on the human race, a number of poisons, and yet humanity appears to have evolved beyond them. The evil effect it was supposed to have was greatly reduced. I don't think that's because spaceships are landing and aliens are giving us help. I think it's just human consciousness is outperforming this lower density evil, which is always lower fourth dimension. So, I do have a strong faith that whoever created us, call him the Almighty, whoever created us, combined with our own determination, not just to survive, because an ant wants to survive. We have something more than an ant. But our wish to evolve into a more worthwhile life form, into a more worthwhile state of being. I think you can combine the two, and then you outmaneuver all of this very primitive, negative fourth dimension. So it was nice to hear Miles speak. It was nice to hear Kerry speak. But I have my own opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And another point was at the end, towards the end of the interview, Miles and Kerry were talking about the need for people to recognize that they need to be the ones to save themselves, in terms of it's down to humanity. And it's the same point that keeps coming up again and again in different situations. It is down to we, the people, whatever country where we are in, to be the force for positive change. And I think that's something that you and I are working every day to help do with the creation and expansion of connecting consciousness, and wanting to help get people together so people can start doing things to help and support each other on a small local level, but also on a countrywide level, on an international level. And this is why we wish to roll out certain projects to help humanity and the world.
Yeah, well, I've been going 11 years now, and obviously, Becky, you've been, an integral part of that in more recent years. I've always said, and those people who are able to find the time and take the trouble to go and find it, I've always said, don't expect the 7th Cavalry to come and save you. And this is when I've addressed questions in a conference, in the days when you could physically go to a conference and you could have a few hundred people there and throw questions at you. And so I used to be asked that a lot. And although I'm British, I would refer to the 7th Cavalry and say, there's too many people wanting the 7th Cavalry to come and save humanity. It is down to us. There's a reason for that. If you want someone to heal and you come in, you do it all for them, A, they haven't understood what's happened, and B, that's fine. They can just sit back on a chair, and if they get sick again, you'll come and heal them. But if you actually work with them and you get them to do the lion's share of the work, they fully understand what the problem was, they can get to grips with it, and they help to heal themselves, which means they're emotionally bought into it, energetically bought into it. So they'll hopefully not allow that situation to occur again. So we shouldn't be looking for Palladians to land en masse in shiny spacecraft and come make it all nice for us so we can go back to work on Monday morning with a clean conscience. That just ain't going to happen. And also, to follow on from your theme, there have been a number of commentators, who've been interviewed, and they say how bad things are, and that people have got to do more to help themselves, but they don't actually say what those things are, or they don't say what they're doing to help. They just sort of say how bad it is, and people have got to do more, and it's their fault. And if you don't do this, this is going to happen. Well, I set Connecting Consciousness up, and as I said, Becky, you are a very integral part of that, and we are doing things about that. We have a 60,000 membership. Our people in our groups meet and talk to support each other. They share links if they're online, and when they can physically meet up, they'll meet up. And that's one aspect of it. We've endorsed organic products that will help humanity. We've endorsed that. We've endorsed the 5G BioShield. We're looking at other technologies. Lots and lots of companies, come to Connecting Consciousness asking us to endorse their products because they want that spiritual backing. But if those products or those companies don't match up to the vision that I have and the vision that I put on Connecting Consciousness, we don't endorse them. We don't work with greedy people. We don't work with people who are making bombs and bullets in one room and then nice smelly liquids in the other room. We don't do that. So, Connecting Consciousness is doing something positively to actually help humanity. And, we are standing ready. We are hoping that we're going to be engaged with at some point in the not too distant future to be involved in some really exciting works. And the coordinators have more knowledge than other people, but some really exciting projects on the planet Earth, really exciting. And we want to play a part in that. And so I don't sit in my podcasts or my conferences telling everyone how bad they are, or it's your fault, or this is going to happen and that's going to happen. What I'm doing is saying, this is personally what I and the coordinators around me are doing. This is what my 60,000 membership are doing. We are all trying not just to help ourselves, but to service to others, try and do good work for other people. So we're trying to make that effort because we do care. And I think that's how we should be judged, as an organization that is actually trying to bring hidden technologies to the planet. Look at the CBD oil that we've endorsed. That is now legal, but for many, many years was only the elite used to have it. And this is what we had on this planet, that the elite got everything and the rest of us got nothing. So we will, as an organization, push for that fair play. We will push for balance. We don't believe in elitism. So yeah, that's my answer. Thanks, Becky.
Okay, thank you. Cindy from California, USA says, "Dear Simon, Becky and all coordinators, thank you so much for all that you do for our group. I had an experience back in 2009 where I was awoken by a being that was pulling or installing something in the right side of my head, and I felt as if I was suffocating. I opened my eyes to see a figure standing right next to my bed that I now believe may have been a reptilian. It looked like the picture you had drawn and shown us at one of your interviews last year at the castle. That's the one with John.
Oh, yeah.
And it stood in kind of a Yul Brynner stance. I covered my face and yelled for a family member to come in, and once they arrived, I looked up and it was gone. I still have lots of pulling in the right side of my head since that time, and I'm wondering if you would know, or if it indeed was a reptilian, why would it pull on my head, or what it may have been installing or removing, and maybe why would it choose to be in my company, and could it come back?"
Okay. Of course, you think Yul Brynner, you think of the Westworld, but I think he's referring to The Sound of Music. Isn't that where he stands with his hands on his hips?
I don't know.
You're not going to know. I know, but I think looking at the energy here, and because I don't have sight of these questions, but I think there's a stance where Yul Brynner in The Sound of Music stands with his hands on his hips, and Maybe it's something else. Right. We're talking non-physical implantation of your brain. If it's still hurting now, it wasn't taken out, it was put in. So it's still troubling you now, it must still be there. Not usually reptilians doing that. They don't usually do that. They have others do it for them, usually greys. But I suppose it's not impossible for them to stoop to manual tasks such as that. They are, after all, to my knowledge, the finest geneticists and microcircuitry group anywhere in the multiverse. They made that their own. And we know the true history of humanity, how the genetics largely came from a manipulation by reptilian type beings, and also the microchips. I mean, not what we know as microchips. I'm talking real microchips, nanochips multiplied by many, many times. This race, superbly clever at doing that, spiritually useless, unfortunately, spiritually empty, but technologically hugely advanced. So let that be a warning to the human race. Don't allow your technical expertise to outstrip your spiritual understanding. I've always said that, to me, the human race was a group of 5-year-old kids in the kindergarten all playing with loaded guns. And the reptilians took that to a much further stage. So without having a proper chat with you and asking you the right questions and having a quick look at that part of the energy field of your head, I can't go any further than that. You're not dead, so clearly it wasn't designed to kill you. It could be anything. It won't be monitoring. It will be something else. Now, before we leave this question, I've probably been one of the very few people to say this, and I don't understand why. You have to be incredibly careful. For all you know, whatever they've done is keeping you alive. I know people who would have had a heart attack, would have had a brain embolism, would just have keeled over and just gone. But they had an out of this world procedure, which is not detectable by civilian medical standards, which actually keeps them alive. And that's why I've always had caution. If someone has an implant, I've always said, don't just go out and have it taken out. Have it thoroughly investigated first before you decide to take it out. Because for all you know, they could have looked and projected ahead and thought, well, this person's going to have a heart attack. And so we want to keep this person alive, therefore we do this. So we have to be very, very careful that any action that you take is the right action for you and not something that would, affect you adversely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jay Buck from North Carolina, USA says, can you tell us the story of Adam and Eve and Lilith? Where is Lilith now? Was it a good thing or a bad thing that they ate the fruit? Was Lilith the one with Adam before or after eating of the fruit? And do all humans have part of the Adam and Eve story in their blood?
Okay. I haven't had anyone ask me that question in that way before. So that's quite refreshing, actually. First of all humanity has a connection to the original founding group, but only a minuscule fraction are able to access that memory. Lilith, look, to me, the great creator, source, God, whatever, created humanity. That's fundamental that humans were created by God and not by any other living creature. That's my belief. But my belief is that more technically advanced creatures then came along and looked at what was then a de-evolved human species on this earth. We de-evolved. And they took this de-evolved species and then they started changing it and tinkering with it and doing this and doing that. And more than one group over a long period of time came back and played with this until we got to where we are today. And that's really important. And as part of that genetic manipulation, the original group were, as the Bible says, that mankind was made in our image. That's what the Bible says. And I've never understood why the official church doesn't try to clarify that and say, surely it should say, made in my image. You know, God, my, one person. Why our image? And what that immediately tells us is there were more than one God. And that's still survived in the Bible today. And that's wonderful that it's survived. It hasn't been, removed. So what we can say is that the human form is the human form, but the signature frequency was in someone else's image. In other words, DNA material was used from this ancestral group, shall we say, to create the humanity that we have at the moment. So Lilith did come first. The problem was that Lilith contained a royal reptilian soul. And it was just too much for Adam. And so what they realized was that they wanted to, they couldn't have such a aggressive soul in a human body. It just wasn't going to work. And so Eve was created after Lilith, and the soul of Eve was completely different from the soul of Lilith. If you put a human being on this planet and give it a 100% reptilian royal soul, it may be in a human body, but it ain't going to act like a human. It's going to act like a very, very frustrated reptilian. And I remember meeting one such person who said to me, how can something so big be contained? This person was referring to themselves. How can something so big be contained in such a small form? So what these geneticists worked out, these reptilian geneticists, was that if you were going to tinker with the human race, you had to do it in a way that the body would accept the soul and the soul would accept the body, and the greater consciousness going right up to God wouldn't slam their fist down on a table and say, this is an affront to me. You have to work within that. So what we have is the story of Adam and Eve, which is broadly accurate, that concept. Although, of course, as I've made clear 10 years ago, it was never Adam and Eve that was thrown out of the Garden of Eden. There were many hundreds of humans that were thrown out from, that special location. The Garden of Eden was a self-contained bio area that humans could live in, and these other entities could live in, and it was one of these safe locations. And so you had these safe locations around the globe. And when the humans were thrown out from that location, they were supposed to die in the wilderness. However, some of the other reptilian groups that had given their genetics did not want these experiment to end. And so they, without knowing of the other side knowing, they came and assisted this group and re-established them and relocated them. And for the record, Adam and Eve split up their groups. So Adam took one group in one direction and Eve took one in another direction, but they were always in visual sight of each other. So they might have been, I don't know, a mile, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles apart. I don't know. But the object being that if one group was taken out and destroyed, then the other group would at least have a chance. And that is why the secret space program, there are bases on the moon and Mars, which are called base Eve and base Adam, because it goes right back to the days of the Garden of Eden when the two groups were taken out and two separate communities were established. It's a very interesting question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. while you're speaking, I am getting some interference. I just don't know if it's going to be picked up on.
Oh, I can't hear it this side.
I hope not. Fingers crossed it'll be okay.
Well, we have apologised to people, and I hope that they understand that it's just one of these moments. Yeah. We will do our best to rectify things as soon as we can.
Sure. Okay, so the next question is from Oscar in the USA, who says, hello, if Joe Biden is not the president, if he is not in charge of the military, then who ordered the airstrikes in Syria and to what end? Now, someone from Elaine from Ireland has written a response. Because
okay, let's hear it.
These questions are open to the all CC members.
Of course, this is our membership. I want to hear what they have to say.
And Elaine has written, in another post, it was suggested that the airstrikes may be a smoke screen in order to send white hats into the underground tunnels. Don't know what to make of it.
Okay. The airstrikes were ordered by the Joint Chiefs in the Pentagon, not by Biden. Biden has got absolutely no say in anything to do with the military. The point is that the attack into Syria was not an attack on Syrian territory. It was an attack on Iranian militias and Iranian secret special forces, which were operating in Syria. So what the Joint Chiefs ordered an airstrike in conjunction with Israel, actually, against Iranian assets operating in Syria. It's straightforward. It's as simple as that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Victoria, our Southern California USA coordinator, is asking on behalf of a member, saying, do Simon or Becky have any information about medbed availability in the Netherlands? And if not in the Netherlands, do they know of any medbed availability elsewhere in Europe? We are dealing with a potentially life-saving situation over there, which is the reason for the question. Thank you, Simon and Becky. Much love and gratitude.
There was one area in the Low Countries, we call it Low Countries, that's not meant offensively. There are certain countries which are operating them, or they have very similar technology. In Germany and Austria, they don't have med beds, but they're having something that's running on a similar sort of line. The difficulty at the moment is these things are very, very few and far between, and they're being very jealously guarded. And I'm using that word deliberately, but they're also being guarded because people will steal them. They'll steal them and try and take the technology. So at the moment, we can't easily obtain them. The time is coming, we're talking months, not years, when these things will be far more readily available. In the first phase, the military and the close associates of the military are using them. Then there'll be a second phase when they are more accessible, and a third phase when we should all be able to have them. Clearly, Connecting Consciousness will be doing what it needs to do to try and have medbed technology in the healing centres or clinics that we're very hopeful that we will be able to start to run around the globe, and other organisations will as well. And so what I'm saying to you is that there's a number of strands of what we could just call the medbed technology. It's not solely controlled by the military. There are other sort of finance operations that are from private individuals or organizations that are running. But the bottom line at the moment is that you can't just walk down the corner and book yourself in. We're still at that stage where it is you can't say outlawed technology, but it's not approved. Remember that the governments of the world set up medical boards that approve whether you can have an injection or you can have this tablet, or whether this, that, or the other. Now, those approvals are based on money, generally speaking, not on the efficacy of what's coming along, but more to do with the people who wield the power and have the money, what they say you can have and what they say you can't have. So, if you have a technology which ultimately would do away with the drug, well, you do have to be very careful, because the number of alternative doctors or professionals who've been found dead in their motor cars or tragically decided to jump out of a window, or drown themselves in 3 inches of water, is astounding. The number of deaths in that field from alternative healers is astounding. And that is, never mind about children in tunnels and 9/11, let's also ensure that another aspect that needs to be absolutely understood is the war that has been waged against good spiritual healers. So early days yet, but hopefully we will be in a position to talk more about the medbed availability in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much. And while we're on this topic, there's 2 things. One is, I want to thank very, very many people are writing into me and coordinators, wanting to be of help in this area, wanting to help out with healing centres, wanting to help out with healing in general, or working with medbeds. And, thank you for doing that. I do apologise for not being able to get back to everyone on all of this, because in the last few months, we've just been inundated with emails and messages. It's been, much of it's been absolutely lovely. And thank you. I just wanted to say thank you now for all the lovely emails and messages of support and messages of wanting to help. I also wanted to say as well, quite a few people have written in, and it's all very heartfelt, and heart-wrenching really, where people are requesting to, be early on in a queue for being able to use medbed for themselves or loved ones because of, terminal illness and things like that. It is, at this stage, we're not making lists of people who can use the medbeds. I would request, please don't do this at the moment, because we can't promise anything at this stage, but we are working towards, trying to set up healing centres and help people. Okay, so thank you for that. Simon, did you want to add any more to that before I go on to the next question?
Yeah, you see, it's not our technology. We could say it's the people's technology, but we don't have a patent on that. We're not the arbiters of that. We will be in a position at some point to, have facilities where that technology will be available. But we are not arbiters of who gets it and who doesn't get it. That's just the reality of it. It's not something that comes out of a conveyor belt and, you go to the high street and you buy it. And this is something that, it's invitation only. There's a big vetting process to it. There has to be a lot of security around it. I hope people just, are pleased that Connecting Consciousness is, in that environment, shall we say, where the time comes, we will, be in a position to, have a discussion with those people around how that's going to be accessible by people. I do think and do believe that the ultimate goal is to have, millions of them so that people can do it. You only need 10 or 15 minutes for most things. There are some things which would take a lot longer process. But it's not something that you would sort of be on, every day of the week. Please don't think of it like that. So can you sort of imagine some sort of portable military facility with all these beds just laid out and people queuing up going on them? Yes, that's exactly what I can. I can also envisage healing centres, are operating it. So, it's about numbers. Nobody actually is going to go and talk about this publicly because they couldn't cope with the millions of people beating on their door saying, I want a medbed, and they look back and they've got 5. So it's only going to happen when the situation can be managed, supply and demand. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've just got, because we're running out of time, just got 2 more questions. So this is the penultimate question. Bob from Ireland says, hello, Simon and Becky. I am confused a little on the vaccines. My confusion lies around President Trump's lead on getting these vaccines to the market ASAP, Was he for or against vaccines? I'm choosing not to get it. I believe it to be what most people in our community believe it to be, a delivery system designed to collapse our immune system, pure evil. Still, in the back of my mind, President Trump, who I love, was creating them at warp speed. Is there one of the brands named vaccines a good one, or was President Trump just playing the Washington, D.C. games in the lead up to last year's stolen election? Lots of love to you, along with your tireless teams.
Thank you.
Actually, can I just respond? There's two more responses to this, which are worth throwing mix. Guy from France responds by saying, the vaccine would have come anyway. By forcing its early arrival, Trump shattered their agenda, and even if it makes casualties, that will destroy their plan. It was supposed to be well tested and long awaited. And we see many countries halting the AstraZeneca vaccine due to adverse effects. It's a real pity for the victims, but at least it awakens a lot of others. And Barbara from Virginia, USA, says, best analysis, Guy. Even Kerry Cassidy expresses puzzlement about this. This vehicle to the transhuman agenda appears to be as solid a part of this reckoning period for the bifurcation of the worlds into organic versus human-designed artificial transhumanism, which has occurred even before Atlantis, apparently. It is the test, and it's unavoidable. So those are two responses to that question.
Which is a fantastic advert for Connecting Consciousness. I'm talking to the audience now, if you're not a member of CC, look what you're missing. Look at the level of debate that we're having. This isn't hopefully, like on many forums where people just attack each other. We obviously that can occur, but what I'm saying is what Becky has just shared with you is the level of debate. And if you want that level of debate, then you should join Connecting Consciousness. If you want to be able to, have that type of, it's not an argument, it's an understanding, then, perhaps that's another aspect, as well as, going and trawling on different websites, actually connect with people. Right, they're very good answers. I can just add a little bit to that. And I'm really just telling everyone what I've said in the past on this. We live in a world still that is controlled by dogma. And, this concept of if you wear a flat hat and a black cape, then you are illuminated. You are a professor, a doctor of science, or a doctor of something, and you are therefore to be respected. If you are a doctor of medicine or a professor of medicine, you wear a white coat and you are to be respected. If you're a police officer, you wear a uniform, and so on and so forth. That is the way that this hierarchical control system exists here on this earth. So if President Trump had said, vaccines are a waste of time, I'm not doing it, he probably eventually would have been found guilty at the equivalent of the Hague Convention or the Nuremberg trials of a genocide of the human race. Because 85% of people want the vaccine because they believe that it will cure them and stop them getting any nasty disease. So what Trump did was, when he was aware of this biological weapon, and this is aware of this about a year and a half before the public were aware of it, his military laboratories were already working on an antidote. So he was being a bit naughty when he said, hey, we've done it in 1 year or what have you. They had more than that because they were aware of what the Wuhan laboratory was producing. But I don't take that away from him. He didn't want to admit that this was not the first time that people had tried to drop a deadly virus on America. And so this was a created virus in a laboratory. And so what he did was he literally got the military, their own biological operations. It's outlawed, so no country admits to having it because it's illegal. But of course, every country in Britain has, it's called Porton Down. But what happened was that the military created a suitable antidote, shall we say, but you can't allow the military to sell to the public. So Trump gave a private company a lot of money to pretend that it was their research. So they got bribed. They took that on board and they said, yeah, we've created this. And that military virus that was created in Wuhan was then countered by a military antidote coming from America. It's not fun, isn't it? In a strange, warped sense of way. And so what we've got are a number of different products, some ranging from just nothing but saline solution, a placebo, through to something that actually does work and is largely effective against this type of virus, right through to something that is, something that I can't even imagine what it's about. I'm personally not taking it. I've not taken it, and I have no intention of taking it. That's my own personal choice. So President Trump did what he had to do, and he didn't make it mandatory. What he said was, it's a choice. It's there. If you want it, you have it. If you don't, you don't. And isn't that what we're doing at the moment? We're making a choice. Who do we believe? What do we believe? And so, we start off with a finite figure. There's 1 and there's 12. And people make choices. And the number that makes the right choice gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So you're going through all these different choices until finally you've got this group of humanity that made all the right choices. They're the ones that will go and ascend to the 5th dimension. All this other group that made the wrong choices have got to come back and start doing it all over again. So look at this vaccination as just another choice that people have to make. And, those who are awake and aware will make the choice based on that. And those that are deeply impressed by a person with a stethoscope round his or her neck and a white coat, they will make a different sort of choice. And that's fine. That is actually fine. I know it's difficult. That's fine. That's their choice. That's right for them. Okay? It's not right for me, but it may be right for them. So they make their choice. They go and do that. And what we have to do as a spiritual community across the planet is concentrate on ourselves, to keep ourselves going, and to concentrate on those people who have open minds, people who want to seek the truth, and to help those people to be reassured they're not going out of their head, they're not crazy, this actually is the real world, and that they've got to believe in themselves and trust what they find out. And so it doesn't matter if at the end of the day, the group that make it is that small and the group that doesn't is that big. That was always meant to be. It doesn't matter. And it's heartbreaking, I know, if people close to you decide that they'll not take your advice, they will take that injection, or they will do this, or they will do that. But that's their choice, isn't it? And it's not a reflection on you. You don't say to yourself, I failed to convince them. That's not the right thing. The point is that individual was always going to do what they did. All right. So I get a lot of people who are deeply, deeply upset that those they care about have done this. And I am not seeking to belittle that. I'm not seeking to take that away. But what I can't afford is for spiritual people to become so hurt by that they stop being strong themselves. And we can't afford to do that. So we have to say the truth, which is, look, that's what they did. That's their choice. You choose not to do that. And here's the flip side of it. And I don't think anyone will have said this to you before. The people who took the injection that deeply, deeply upset that you didn't, they can't understand why you didn't take that injection. And they feel deeply hurt that they couldn't convince you to take that injection. And they're very sad for you. So look at it from that. And isn't it just the two halves of the energy, the two sides of the energy? One side is right in terms of the overall picture, but one side is right because it was right for them. So I don't want to get down into a philosophical argument, but ultimately we've got to get back on track here. People will do what they've got to do. Let's get back on and let's come through this and come through it much stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you didn't want to have a philosophical argument, maybe because you could feel me wanting to say something. You were talking about right choices and
You said we've got one more question.
pardon?
Because you said
We have.
running out of time.
We have. We've got. I just wanted to say we've got. You talked about, right choices and wrong choices. It's very, very difficult because it depends on how people's brains are wired and where the point of reference that they're coming from, and also in terms of some people going to evolve more quickly than others, a smaller group going to evolve more quickly than others. It's perhaps just that's maybe the shortest path, and the other way would be a longer path, but they'll get there eventually. So in a way, there's no necessarily right or wrong. There's just different choices which lead to different pathways. But in the grand scheme of things, over millennia and the multiverse, these choices are all just part of a process. So there's a quicker way and a longer way.
Well, you might be right, and I'm going to show you that you are right in terms of the beginning, but you're not right in terms of the end. We are at the end of this cycle. We are at the end of this phase. Therefore, these choices are pivotal in deciding whether we cut the cord, and we make it, or whether we don't. Now, let's go back to show why you're right in the early cycle, early phase. When we are all created by the great creator, and we are asked, where do you want to start your journey? And I want you to imagine, as we're still in a world of money, a monopoly board. So I want the audience to imagine a monopoly board, because I want to create in your mind that time is not linear. Time comes back on ourselves, and you can choose the figure of 8 or an elliptical or a spiral, doesn't matter. Now, and a monopoly board is usually oblong or square, but you can come back on yourself. Your piece goes around the board. That'll do me. Happy with that. All right. So people will say often, why does it matter where you start or what choices you make? Coming back to your point, because we're going to come back on ourselves anyway. And here's the point, that if I choose to be in a high-end property on my monopoly board to start with, I am going to have servants, I'm going to have the maid, I'm going to have all of the wonderful things, a really nice car and everything. That's how I'm going to start off. That's going to be my first impression on this planet. That's going to really affect the way the rest of my journey on this monopoly board will be, because I've had the good life. Then I throw the dice and my token ends up on a real downtrodden part of the world. And suddenly I don't have a maid anymore. I have this rubbish property and my life is awful. And I'm the one now being put upon. I'm the maid. I'm the servant. I'm the one doing these dead-end jobs. And so through that game of Monopoly, my piece has landed on certain places, and they have all given me an understanding. Now, the choice I made where I start has a fundamental effect on how I perceive all of the experiences that are presented to me on my many, many lifetimes, which means that at this critical point on Earth's division, which is where we are now, there are those that see the truth, hello, dog, and those that do not see the truth. Just desperate to get on camera. That was critical timing. Those that see the truth and say, I'm not having that, and those that are still in their journey of learning and they've not yet grasped enough to cut through the lies and are still on this aspect of themselves, because what they landed on their board, their monopoly board, has not yet given them all of the information they needed, or at least they didn't themselves interpret it in a way that allowed a fast track to the truth. So all of the people across the planet who are spiritual and who understand what's going on have put together their monopoly board journey and are now reasonably clear in their minds what is right and what is wrong. But it's not that the individual is right or wrong. The person is right for the journey that they're on, but they should congratulate themselves. This isn't meant arrogantly. You should congratulate yourselves that you got it right just when you needed to. In other words, you know, it comes round and it's like pass go, collect 200, whether that's pounds or dollars. Well, you know, if you're reaching that point and you've got it and you understand it, then you did it in the time that you were given. So this journey around the board, you actually did it. You did it because you were meant to do it. And those that don't, they'll go back and they'll have to go again. So in terms of the early stage, yes. But in terms of now, this is the moment of choice. We really are at the 11th hour. Yes, it's exciting. It's also damn nervy. But here we are. And everyone who's listening to this has broken the barrier. All of you listening to this, you made it in time. You made that decision to see the truth in time. You don't need another go of that Monopoly board. You don't need to go through the high end and the low end. You're ready now to come off that Monopoly board and say, what's the next challenge? And that's the fifth dimension, which won't be a Monopoly board. It'll be something a damn sight more spiritual than what we're having to go through now. So that's an answer. And I hope that helps people.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, just to finish off with, really, this is from Susan in Stockholm, Sweden. Dear Simon et al., since we are a spiritual group, I would like to see and hear more about this topic. For instance, a whole show dedicated to spiritual growth. Much love from Sweden and your former coordinator, Susan. And Catherine, I think from Canada, has said, very much miss the spiritual-based podcasts of the past, albeit these are unprecedented times which Simon is addressing. A more spiritual or planetary update would also be welcome. I agree. So thank you, Susan and Catherine.
Well, you two are, the voice that have come through saying, let's try and get back. And I'm glad that you appreciate that, unprecedented times. I mean, they really are. And Sidney Powell, in fact, in her interview with Doug Billings, used the word unprecedented times. It's a good interview, actually. I put it on the site. You need to watch that, please. So what we have is today's session is a bit of an update at the beginning, spiritual side, which is the format we've always had, and we will be doing this in future. Technology allowing us to do it, but certainly we are hoping we should be back on YouTube in a few short weeks. But we've got to make a little list of all the words I can't say. So before I go on YouTube, I'll have to make a note of what I'm allowed to say and what I can't say. And one day when we're in a much freer world, within reason, we should be able to say what we want to say. So when we get back onto YouTube, I will have to be a little bit careful unless that, I'm prepared to have it all taken off again. All right. So to Becky, thank you to all the coordinators across the globe. Thank you to all the membership. Just keep on in there. We're getting there. And don't be too worried by all the nonsense that is swirling around on the internet. So thank you very much indeed. Speak to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you for me as well. Thank you. Bye.